Hello, Internet, and welcome to an even weirder move, Tales from the Bottom Shelf. In this series of videos, what I'm going to be doing is I have a geek list up on Board Game Geek where I have like a shameful, awful number of games that I have on my shelves that I haven't played. This is going to be stuff that I either got for a really good deal at like a thrift store, used bookstore or something, or that I was really anticipating, was really hyped about and bought, and then couldn't get to the table for whatever reason, or any other number of terrible reasons why I might have bought a board game and never opened it, except to, of course, punch out all of the pieces and put them in little bags, which I think for some of us might be the primary time expenditure in our hobby. So anyway, I've got this list, and as an incentive to play through the games on the list, I've asked my significant other to forbid me, I guess, from buying any more games. Which, although I guess I could conceivably still just buy more games, somehow the psychological pressure there is so far kept me from actually doing it. So what I've decided to do is, as I go through that list, maybe pick out like sets of 5 of the games that I go through and give just a really brief overview, kind of a capsule review of those games, let you guys know what I thought of them, and if I feel like I was justified in picking them up when I did so or not. So I'm going to start with the first 5 games on the list. I'll put a link to that list in the description. Enjoy. So the first game on the list is R Eco, by Susumu Kawasaki from Z-Man Games. So I got this game on like the back shelf, like the clearance shelf of a local game store, because I went in there, was looking through that shelf. I got a couple of neat things that day. I think I got Castle from the Blue Box series, Fantasy Business, some of those older games. This was sitting there, and then like a week later or so, I heard it mentioned by Z Garcia on one of the Dice Tower Top 10s, and I typically agree with Z's gaming preferences, so I decided to go back and pick it up, and I wasn't really disappointed by it. So this game has a similar feel to something like maybe No Thanks or Six Nimmt or Slide 5 or whatever it is you want to call that Walking Dead survival zombie card game. Basically what you're doing is you're trying to recycle trash cards in your hand, and the cards have 4 different suits. And every time that you fill up one of the recycling centers, you're going to get a token, and the token can be worth positive or negative points at the end of the game. You're also trying to make sure you don't go over a hand limit, because if you exceed the hand limit, you're going to have to dispose of cards illegally, which is worth negative points at the end of the game. And the tricky thing is, every time you partially get rid of some of your cards at one of the recycling centers, there's going to be more garbage that appears beneath that stack, and every time you put cards on one of the recycling centers, you have to take all of the garbage cards from beneath it, which could easily put you over the hand limit. So you're always kind of managing, alright, what do I need to do to score points versus what do I need to do to not put my hand over this hand limit. So this game was really, really tense. I enjoyed it a lot with 2 players. I've played 3 and 4 player games since then, and I do not like them as much. Because the game goes from being really tense to being just really, really chaotic, and it's really hard to predict what's going on. Maybe I'm just not good enough at the game, but I found it a lot easier to keep track of things and make like a little bit of a plan into the future in the 2-player game, whereas in the 3 and 4-player game it was kind of impossible. But even with that, I really, really like this as a 2-player game, so I would suggest if you see a copy sitting around on a shelf, go ahead and snag it. That's R Eco from Z-Man Games. Alright, so next up we have Nile Deluxor, which is the deluxe edition of Nile, and Luxor is a place in Egypt, so that works out really well. This is a game by Daniel Callister, which was released by Minion Games, I think in both of its incarnations. Basically what you're doing here is building fields of different crops with the goal of harvesting across all the different crops that are available. And at the end of the game, you're going to score points for the, I guess not score points, but the winner's going to be determined by whoever has the most in their least populous crop field area, right? So if the thing I have the least of is broccoli, and I have only 1 broccoli, then I'm not probably going to be doing very well, and I don't think broccoli's in this game. Anyway, there are a couple things about this game that I didn't really get. I guess it doesn't not that they're like complicated, but I kind of didn't understand what they were doing mechanically in the game. So one of the things is there's these speculation cards which you can do instead of planting. And if you play one of the speculation cards instead, if the next card that floods is one of the types that's listed on your speculation card, you're going to get 3 or 6 cards based on, I don't know, which ones you got to match, and draw those. And that's a nice windfall of cards, but you gave up your ability to plant, which I think is a little strange. I don't know, so I never really used those much in our games, and I don't think my opponents used much of them either. They're mostly thrown away to get to use the trade action. So I don't know, maybe the case that we were just playing weirdly. It's like a groupthink thing. The second thing was there's a card that looks like it's supposed to be like a rubber band mechanism. You have this Plague of Locusts card that comes along and it finds whoever has the single biggest field, and it just destroys everything that's in their field. Now, the way this game works, you can't plant a field of a crop that someone else already has. So, to use the example of the fictitious broccoli again, if I have 2 broccoli, you can't plant 1 broccoli or 2 broccoli. But you would be able to plant 3, and then that would take away my control of those broccolis, and that would go in the discard. So playing bigger and bigger fields is how you're like wresting control away from other people in certain areas. But it seems like this card is designed to be like a Bash the Leader card, but it might not actually be a Bash the Leader card, because you can get in a pretty bad position if you're dealt only one kind of card. And if you then use those to take that thing away from someone else, which would be like the only move you'd be able to do in that case, and then Plague of Locusts comes and destroys all the stuff you have just been Bash the Loser on. And Bash the Loser never feels good. That's something that can happen in this game with that card, so that's a little weird. We played with the Monuments expansion as well, which basically adds a 4th type of fruit. Well, a lot of types of fruits. But it adds rock as one of the vegetables to the game. And if you have these stones, you can build a field of stones and decide that that's one of these different monuments. It's going to give you a special power. And you, instead of like harvesting, you never score those. They just kind of decay over time, which is really interesting. It's kind of an inversion of the way the other cards in the game work. So I did like that a lot, and that added another thing to compete over that felt a little bit different than the way that the Plague and the field competitions would work. I like this game okay. I think it'll stay in my collection for a little bit. I'll have to give it a few more plays with more people. Most of the plays I've had so far have been with 2, and I don't think it's an ideal 2-player game. But the I don't know, the art is really nice. The game plays pretty smoothly, although there are a couple of, like, the rules for planting are a little weird. I think you can plant 2 or more of one kind, 2 of 2 different kinds as long as you already have one of them, or as many as you want as long as you already have all of them, or something like that, which isn't super intuitive, but once you get into playing the game, it's a little bit more smooth. So yeah, I like this game. I'm a little lukewarm on it. I'll have to see how it works with more people, but that's a Nile Deluxor from Minion Games. Alright, so the third game is Ivanhoe by Reiner Knizia, which was released by GMT Games. This is sort of I want to say it's kind of like a trick-taking or ladder-climbing game of some kind. It feels a lot like Blue Moon to me, actually. You're starting a tournament in one of these different weapon fighting styles, and those are basically the suits in the game. And at the end of your turn, you have to either have more cards in front of you or more value of cards in front of you than the current winner of the tournament, or you have to drop out of the tournament, basically. So you're always sort of upping the ante in what you're playing. And there's some tricky action cards that do some crazy stuff, like you can remove cards or make everyone's cards only worth 1, or you can change the suit that's the current like trump or the current whatever of the tournament. Some players going to win when they have one tournament of each of the different suits, and there's like a wild tournament, like purple tournament. When you beat that, when you win a purple tournament, you get to choose which other color of tournament you want to have one, which chip you're going to take, basically. I don't know how much I can say about this game because I've only played it with 2 players, and I feel like it's really not supposed to be much of a 2-player game. But I'll give you my thoughts about it so far. Right now, this game seems like it's really chaotic, and it's not really what I was expecting from like a Knizia title. There's a lot of action cards and things in this game that do really powerful, swingy stuff. And at least in a 2-player game, it feels like those are, I don't know, like each player is going to have a good chunk of them, and so you're going to be constantly doing these really swingy, unpredictable things in the game, which definitely makes it more interesting than a, straight up, all right, well, you played 4, I'll play 5 red, or I don't have 5 red, I guess I'm done. More interesting than that kind of a game, but it's definitely, I don't know, it's very unpredictable, which I didn't like that aspect of it that much. But I feel like this might actually work a little bit better with more people because dropping out of a tournament might not always be as bad. With 2 people, you really don't want to do that. Obviously, because you're just giving the victory chip to your opponent. Unless they're doing a tournament of a type they've already won, you can safely surrender it to them then, I guess. But with more people, you'd be able to say, alright, well, I can let you win a yellow because I really just don't need to let you win the yellow, so I'll be fine as long as you're not winning it. You can make some more like decisions of that nature. So right now I'm not so big on this game, but I'm going to give it a few plays with more people, see what comes of that. So that's Ivanhoe, Reiner Knizia GMT games. Alright, so next up, Glory to Rome, the Black Box Edition. So the couple of plays that I've managed to get in of this probably aren't the best to judge it off of, because the people that I played with were kind of new to this style or genre of games. So maybe things like San Juan, Race for the Galaxy, maybe Eminent Domain could be related to these, but this type of thing just was kind of new, and so for a lot of those players, the idea that the cards' abilities were not meaningful really until they were made as buildings. I don't know, it took like most of the game for the flow to really kind of sink in, and both of those groups contained like some new players, so it didn't get like a legitimate everyone really understands the gameplay, and maybe that's partially my fault, but I'm gonna go ahead and partially blame I'm gonna blame this chart. So this is the culprit, because you can't like expect someone to look at this and know anything. I mean, like, I know how to play the game now, and there's some stuff on here I'm like, what are you talking about with that? Oh, okay, it's because that actually, like, this doesn't explain to someone who doesn't know the rules. This only, like, sort of explains to someone who already knows the rules. And so, I don't know. Like, if you look at that before you know the game, I think maybe you scream. But despite all of that, I actually really liked this game, and I was surprised by that, because I did not like Race for the Galaxy the first time I played it, although it's since sort of grown on me a bit. And one of the reasons for that is I don't really enjoy games where there's a really high burden of knowledge, where you have to know a lot about what cards are in the game, a lot about a lot of different game objects that are moving around in order to actually make the best decisions. A mild form of this is a lot of Euro games have like end game bonus tiles that you kind of need to be working towards specific ones at the beginning of the game if you're going to get, the best score that you can. And if you don't know that and you don't know what those are and you just kind of do a general greedy, like, oh, this will get me the most points this round sort of thing, you're not prepared for the big swing in points that's going to happen when those late game, purple buildings or whatever become relevant. And Puerto Rico and those types of games are visible, but some games they're not. Spirium is a recent game where there's in-game scoring conditions that are they're in the deck, and so they really need to be known, but when you're teaching the game, you don't want to go through and be like, here's every card. Yeah, so those types of things in games are usually kind of a speed bump for me enjoying it, and that was definitely the case in Race for the Galaxy, but I feel that Glory to Rome really earns that complexity a little bit more because the effects that things have in Glory to Rome are way more like dynamic. They're just bigger, more interesting combo-y effects. And then in Race for the Galaxy, where you're kind of turning a points engine, and you need to have the pieces that interact well with each other, but even when they do that, it's not like a... I don't know, it doesn't feel like as much of a big effect, which is actually kind of the opposite of what I would have thought that I would like. But I don't know, it makes Glory to Rome feel like you have more power, I guess, over what you're doing, which is definitely a really likable thing. It's also something that happens in Innovation, another game that I just really did not like the first couple of times I played it, and as I continued to play it, it got better and grew on me to where it's now a game that I would definitely suggest playing in Breakout pretty often, although it definitely has that same sort of a problem where if you don't know the makeup of the decks, then you can't really be expected to make decent decisions for your first like several games. But yeah, so I'm definitely going to hang on to this. I would be really wary about breaking it out with new people again, because those games, I mean, they weren't like disasters or anything, but it's not, I don't know, the game is definitely a thing to wrap your head around. So I would probably say that maybe San Juan or Imminent Domain, because of the role selection thing, or Race for the Galaxy are maybe prerequisites for this, so I wouldn't try to play this with people that hadn't played those already, so that it would just be easier. I wouldn't have to there's not as much burden of explaining like the mechanics of the game. You can get around to thinking about what the cards do. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna keep it, and I hope to get a lot more plays of this out in the future. So that's Glory to Rome by Cambridge Games Factory and Carl Chudik. Alright, the final game of these first 5, and actually my favorite of the 5, is Magnum Sal, designed by these guys. This guy, and that guy, and released by these guys. So, this game is called a worker placement game on Board Game Geek by Liars. So it's not a worker placement game. You have workers and you place them, but I mean, Carcassonne isn't a worker placement game and you're putting guys on tiles to score points. This is not a worker placement game at all, in any real sense of that term. What this is it's a really innovative, unique game where you're combining an economic sort of engine thing going on this top board with this spatial puzzle in the mines. So what you're doing is you're building like a bucket brigade of your meeples down into the mine to reach to tiles that have valuable resources on them and extract them. And you can pass basically 1 cube per guy that you have standing in the area where you're extracting them from up to the surface, as long as there's a connected chain of people all the way back to the surface. And the neat thing about it is they don't have to be your people, but if anyone else's worker is in that chain on a square that you don't have a worker on, you have to pay them to pass your cubes through them, which is really neat. So you have this whole mechanism down there of being able to say, all right, I'm going to be the person that's going deep into the mine getting valuable cubes out, but I have to pay for it, or I'm the person that's going to stay in the upper levels of the mine, but every time someone goes deeper, they're going to have to pay me for the privilege of using my guys to carry their stuff back out. And you can also do a really similar thing on the main board. You can take the actions on the main board without placing a worker there, so it's not a worker placement game, again, like I said, even at all, ever. But you can have a worker stand on that space, and what that's going to do is every time someone takes that action, you're going to get kickbacks from the game. So, for example, if someone just overturned a tile, and it's like a really, really flooded tile full of a bunch of valuable cubes, you might put one of your guys on the water pump square, knowing that, you know, in order for that guy to get those cubes out of there, he's going to have to pump all the water out, and every time that he does that, you're going to get money for doing that. Alternately, there's a bunch of really good tools set up. Maybe in the workshop, you can buy those, they kind of slide down and become cheaper. You can buy those to bypass other people's meeples, so you could buy like a cart that's going to let you skip over 2 squares as you're carrying cubes out of the almost said dungeon, out of the mine. I don't know. There's a lot of really neat stuff in this game, and one thing I really like about it is that you do have the potential for that like middleman strategy, where you're some player you're setting yourself up to make points, to score points, make money every time that someone else scores points or makes money. And for a game that's like this long, it's like an hour and a half maybe. And it's not like a super heavy game either. Most games of this like weight range don't really have that. I haven't seen too many that have that capability for you to be set yourself up to be like the conduit for other people's success and make money off of what they're doing. You mostly hear about that in like really long, larger economic games. So I really like that about this. The game has a bunch of really unique mechanisms in it that I haven't seen anything really done that's that similar to. And I think it kind of got passed over by a lot of people because of it being labeled as a worker placement game. And I know that if I see another game announced as a worker placement, a new worker placement game about getting stuff out of the ground in a kingdom, like that's not something that I get really hyped about. But if you showed me this spatial puzzle, and that's what got me interested in the game to begin with, this like, oh, you're building this chain of guys and you can basically pin people's guys down. Because you're not allowed to remove a guy that would separate the chain into two groups. So if you're really clever about it, you can say, all right, well, you got to leave that guy there now because he's the only thing holding our group together. I don't know. There's a lot of really neat stuff like that going on in this game. So this is one of my favorites for sure. There's an expansion called Muria that exists. I think Game Surplus sometimes has that, and I talked to them a while back about trying to get a copy, and they're waiting for another game from Leonardo Games to come out, so they're going to order both of those at the same time. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to getting that expansion and seeing what that does to this game, because already this is sort of one of my new favorite games, I think. That's Magnum Sal from Leonardo Games. Alright, so that's the first 5 games off of my Tales from the Bottom Shelf list. I just gave a little brief overview of each of them and told you what I thought. I think all of these are actually going to stay in my collection for now. There's a couple of them that are kind of on the edge until I get a couple of plays with different player accounts. But they're all relatively unique, which makes me feel like picking them up was a pretty good idea. I feel okay about it. I can rationalize having done that. So I'm probably going to make one of these videos, I don't know, every couple weeks or so, going over the next 5 on that list. If you guys are watching this and you care about that, let me know what you would like to hear about with those 5 games. If these capsule reviews are doing it for you, if you want to hear a little bit more of the story, I guess, of why I grabbed those games to begin with, or something like that. But yeah, just leave that in the comments, either on BGG or on YouTube. That's probably it. So, until next time, this is an even weirder move. Hoping to actually play all these. Bye.